Good morning, chess fans. Max Murray here, host of The Max Murray Show, where today we will be drinking, this morning actually, we'll be drinking good coffee and playing bad chess. I'm working my way through the chess.com bots. I've defeated the three 1500s quite handily, I might add. I defeated the first of the 1600s, Pablo. Then I lost badly twice in a row to Joel, a 1600 bot, punching well above his weight, in my opinion. Finally defeated him yesterday with the white pieces. I did pretty well, although the computer evaluation was not what I expected. I thought I'd played an accurate or pseudo-accurate opening and I had missed chances, but in fact when I did the computer evaluation it was the opposite. My opening play was inaccurate, and during the middle game complications I'd actually found good moves, not necessarily the best move. The moves were better than I thought. D2, D4 best by test, or sorry, second best by test. Isabel 1600 is allegedly an endgame specialist. I consider myself a good endgame player. I believe the transition between the middle game and the end game is where my chess shines. My openings are okay. I play them well. I play them accurate as a rule because I have a system with white that I play every time, and now you can see my system in implementation where I move my light squared bishop off its starting square on f1 and develop it to the e2 square, not the d3 square as you might be more familiar with for collie players. And then I castle here. So now I have my king in safety, my minor pieces on my king side developed, my rook brought towards the center, and I have a share of the center too where I'm maintaining a strong point on d4. I can play these first five moves irrespective of what my opponent does, and in fact I've been barely noticing them. Unless they make a pawn break somehow very early, I'm going to play this formation no matter what they do. That does give black a free hand in the opening, and it sort of ensures that I will not get a big advantage out of the open. I can't expect it unless my opponent plays something ridiculous, which has happened against some of these lower rated bots. They have played ridiculous opening systems. However, despite not getting a big advantage out of the opening, I do usually get a sliver of an advantage, which is all I want, and I am also highly attack resistant. So this formation, I'm in here very solid defensively, particularly since I haven't moved any of the pawns in front of my king. I have the strongest really defender on the king side, the knight on f3. And the king is safely tucked away in the corner. Now, the question becomes after these first five moves, and I'm still fishing for a name for this opening system. The computer calls it a collie or a variation of the collie, but in my opinion, white bishop has to be on d3 in order for you to be playing a collie, where you can play the Koltanowski system, where the bishop on d3 supports an early e4 pawn advance, or the Zukertort collie system, where pawn to b3 and bishop b to b2, the fianchetto, are the calling cards. I have flirted, is that a word? I have flirted in the past with playing the King's Indian attack, which would be very similar in concept to what I'm doing. The King's Indian attack means developing the bishop from the f1 square to the g2 square in a fianchetto type situation. It is fast. So King's Indian attack, I'd play d4 like I do, knight to f6, same. Right, but instead of playing 3e3, we play 3g3, and then we develop the bishop, fianchetto, and castle. The King's Indian attack. I'm sorry, we don't play d4 in the King's Indian attack. We actually start out by playing knight to f3 to inhibit e4, e5, or e7, e5. And then we fianchetto, then we castle, then we play d3. So the King's Indian attack doesn't seek to create a stronghold in the center right away. Then after d3, white can proceed with either e2, e4, or c2, c4 later as the central pawn breaks. There is also, in the King's Indian attack, white is planning to play the f2 pawn up to f4 and creating attacks thusly. But I don't play any of that. Sorry for the long digression. I didn't want to go into a long discussion about the King's Indian attack. Bobby Fischer said it was his favorite for a long time. Let's focus on my opening. So I've accomplished my first 5 moves. I need a name for this opening. If you want to find one for me, I don't know what I can call it. The St. Louis attack. It's not an attack. It's not even remotely an attack. The St. Louis opening. I don't know what to call it. I've played several hundred games in this, so I feel kind of right to plant my flag and name it after myself for our private conversations here on YouTube. Actually, they're very public conversations because all my videos are public, but you get my drift. I wouldn't presume to be a chess player of enough stature that a opening could be named after me. So I'm just kind of catching up what Black is doing here while I'm rambling, and I do observe that he played knight c6 on move 4. I was too busy yapping my jaw to really pay attention. A little bit of a double-edged type move. He's attacking here, right? So that's the scam that Isabel's trying to pull on me. A whirlwind attack on my c2 pawn, protected only by the queen. Could be coming. I do want to prevent this knight from posting up on my side of the board. I have so much problems with knights posting on my side of the board that I've really got to stop that at all costs, even at the concession of surrendering initiative or derailing my own plans, because I have so much problems against posted knights. I would really like to come up with an opening system where I exchange a bishop for a knight early, such as the Ruy Lopez has that feature. Lasker played it. Creates an imbalanced pound structure on the queen side when black recaptures with the d pawn, and leads to an imbalanced game. So one of the problems with my opening system is because black does have a free hand. If black does play symmetrically, and black hasn't here because of this critical move knight c6, but if black plays symmetrically, I believe black equalizes, and the white can get just the barest thinnest hair width advantage out of the opening then, if at all. My usual move is to proceed c2, c4, then knight c3, then support the pawn with b3, fin shadow the bishop to the long dark square diagonal, and bring the rook to c1. That's sort of plan A. I also have a kind of a plan B, which is to play Kali Zukertort style variation where I play b3 followed by bishop b2. And I'd be more inclined to play that if black had a pawn sitting on either the c5 or the e5 squares, because then I could vacate that diagonal and open it up for my dark square bishop on the long diagonal here. With my pawn on d4 like this, a fin shadow bishop might not go anywhere for a very long time, although it does support the strong points. So bad bishops defend good pawns. Sort of a temptation in the system, and I'm not this type of player, but you know them well. I'm not the type of player to put my bishop on b5 and pin the knight to the king, and I get annoyed when people do that to me. So annoyed that that was one of the inspirations for coming up with my opening system where I developed the bishop to e2 instead of d3, because now this pin, if black were to develop the bishop to g4, the queen would not be pinned, and I could always effectuate a trade against this bishop. Another sort of positional consideration at this moment in time is the fact that he is going for a fin shadow dark squared bishop, but he has placed his light squared bishop on f5. That will prevent me from developing my queen to c2, which is a key square. but he is vulnerable to knight to h4 in some variations. And if he gets fancy and tries to come to e4, then it's f3, and he'll have to exchange that bishop for the knight. If I come to knight to h4, also attacking the bishop, then he'll likely have to redeploy it, and who knows where he could put it then. Probably on d7. He couldn't go here because that square, the g4 square, is under my control, with the queen and bishop battery lined up like the sights of a rifle on that square. But I need to deal with this quasi-threat here. Even if the knight does make it to b4, the standard defense for an attack on such a pawn with the knight and bishop, it's a fried liver type of attack, coordinating the knight and bishop against a c pawn like this. I would put the knight on b3. I'm sorry, a3. And then even if he opens up the dark square diagonal to that knight, he can't exchange off the defender, my knight, because his own knight is in the way and he's stepping on his own toes. Now, a tempting move to cover this b4 square and just avoid everything is to play c3, a triangle. I have experimented with triangles in the past. It is a variant I can do with this opening system here. In addition to c4, like I mentioned earlier, or a fianchetto bishop, which are my two plan A and plan B. So plan C is kind of a triangle. I have not had a lot of success with it. You see it in the Kali quite a bit because the bishop is on d3 in the Kali systems, and black coming to b4 would be an attack against that light squared bishop. So in the Kali system proper, you do see c3 a lot. But remember, the purpose of the Kali system is to advance this e-pawn to e4 at the proper time, which would usually backed by a rook on e1 and the knight coming here to d2, all supporting the advance of this e-pawn. I'm not particularly set up for that. I would have to relocate my bishop, which isn't necessarily bad. Sometimes I do spend a tempo to move the bishop to d3, and I will do it even in opposition of a light square black bishop on f5. But the book move for me is c4. That's what I want to play. And then I want to move knight to c3. I don't really want my knight on d2. Like I said, I have not been planning to play e2, e4. So the knight supporting that advance doesn't make much sense. I'm going to play c4. Let's say she goes in, all in, Isabel, with knight b4, which bot may well do. Then I'll play knight a3, like I said, defend that square, because by that time I'm defending a square, not a pawn. The target will have moved. If I do this move and do, then I won't get this knight out very easily unless I play bishop to d2 and trade off the knight. I've talked about trading my bishops for knights just because I have such difficulty playing against the knight. Some players look at that as the minor exchange, bishop for knight, and they consider the person who lost the bishop to be slightly behind in that bargain. I think it's based so much on position that bishops and knights, and then some players love having the two bishops, and they consider that an absolute type advantage on the board, with the exception of completely clogged board where the bishops have no mobility. But I'm not a big fanboy of the two bishops. Yes, I recognize and understand the power that those two bishops working together can control the black and white complex, every square on the board. But the knight and bishop also has a certain beauty to it, because the knight can control dark squares if it needs to, but it can also switch and double up on the white squares. So one thing the two bishops can't do is they can't work together on the same complex. It's against the rules of chess to move your bishop from light square to a dark square, vice versa. But this is how I get beat against these bots. So I sit here and I yammer on and on and on and on about chess and different positional considerations and sometimes philosophical chess philosophy. And I don't focus on the concrete. So I have to make a decision about this c pawn, whether we go for the triangle, and we might just to experiment with it. I might go for the triangle, right? Then offer the exchange of the light squared bishops, take it with the queen, develop my knight to d2, bring my rook to e1, and push e2, e4. He can't defend this pawn, this e4 square with another pawn easily because one is locked behind two pieces. And the second is, it's Isabel, if she castles behind her pawns here on the king's side, then moving f7 to f5 would be very weakening. The king would be flapping in the breeze at that point on these diagonals here. So that's a plan I might just try just to see how it goes. One of the perhaps good things about it is I don't lose too much time and energy moving my bishop to d3 because it has the purpose of exchanging off his light squared bishop and bringing my queen to the d3 square. And the queen on d3 is usually pretty good, believe it or not, in these openings. You would think it's vulnerable, but it won't be with a pawn on c6. So let's, just for funsies, let's go ahead and play c2, c3. Now, black could play bishop takes knight, turning the tables on me and actually sacrificing the minor exchange against me and removing one of my knights. I do love to play with my knights. However, I'll castle, and I don't think black is theoretically better. And it seems bizarre to make two moves with a piece, including developing it to the f5 square and then exchange it for a piece that hasn't even moved off the starting square yet. Seems like a waste of time, and I benefit from that. So here we go. We're going to go with the triangle. I don't believe this is best. We're going to play it. Here is e6 to defend the d pawn, which I'm not pressuring. Notice now how the bishop has just restricted its retreat. Bishop no longer can fall back to the d7 square, which I think would just be a little more natural. Also, to take note of this position, the Fiend Shadow has not happened yet. The human players, almost always, you can take it to the bank, are going to play g7, g6, and then Fiend Shadow the Bishop immediately on the next move. So, black actually played g6 on the second move and then hasn't touched the dark squared bishop yet. Now, when I played Joel yesterday, Joel lost because he didn't castle on the king side, and then the computer got its wires crossed, and the king ended up, believe it or not, you won't believe it, but it's true, the king moved from e8 to d7 in the early middle game and became a monster target for me to open the position with a pawn storm, and resulted in my victory, a fairly clear victory too, I might add, which I played not inaccurately. Okay, so now look at this restricted bishop, and we need to pay attention to that because we could try and trap it, right? With a pawn. This might be interesting. Try. The bishop, though, can come. We could try and trap it. And I wish I don't play c2, c3 very much. And if I did, I would have experience against this pawn formation. And I would know for a fact, one way or the other, whether a situation like h3 followed by g4 is going to trap this bishop. It will move to the e4 square, but I will vacate with the knight and then further smother the bishop and pawns by playing f2, f3. And at that point, the bishop will be out of squares. But look, it can always exchange itself. In the last extremity, the light square bishop can play Bishop takes knight. Now, I want to develop the knight here, but I can't do that right away, and I can't develop my bishop either, so I'm a little nervous because I lose games in my system. Pay attention. When I don't develop my queen side. Whoa, no big... Actually, that should come as no surprise. If you don't get your pieces off the starting squares, if you don't get your players off the bench and into the game, you lose. You can lose very easily. However, in this position, rapid development no longer really an important priority since the triangle has announced my intention of maintaining a strong point for the time being, and black has also positioned the pawns rather, I want to say passively, but let's use the word solid, and has disallowed himself the pawn break c7, c5, which is an equalizing type move for black in so many different opening variations related to the queen's pawn. Let's trade the bishop off. If I go here, okay, if I go to bishop d3 and offer the trade of bishops, which is what my plan is, I could run into, and I've seen this before, e takes the bishop, followed by the knight dropping into e4. Looks scary, but I've kind of learned the immediate thing that must be done is that knight has to be kicked with f3. I can always kick anything out of this square with f3 and continue with my plan, my ultimate plan, the ultimate goal at world domination by playing e3, e4. I don't think the computer is going to like. I personally think he should have left the bishop there and played this. Maybe he's a little worried by the fact that now the d pawn can't be covered by a pawn on c because blocked by the knight, and the queen has to cover it, and who knows what kind of pressure I could get against that pawn. You see how his light square is vacated and he has weakened the defense of the b7 pawn. In fact, it is completely undefended at the moment. So queen b3 is a thematic type response to these anti-collie bishops. It's called an anti-collie bishop because by moving the light squared bishop to the f5 square, black is trying to prevent my bishop from coming to d3, which is the collie bishop. That's the whole theme of my rant or my raving this morning. The white bishop on d3 is a collie bishop proper to support the pawn advance. So the black thought is that we're going to shut the whole collie system down by playing bishop f5, but I say nay, nay, moose breath. Okay, I say nay, nay, moose breath to that. It's not that simple. All right, that's a good move. Bishop to e6, very common against my system for this dark squared bishop to come to e6. It doesn't really have any choice to go further down the road. However, he has played the fianchetto move and then not pocketed the bishop, as noted earlier, which weakened these dark squares quite gratuitously, honestly, quite gratuitously, that I may be able to take advantage of and get myself going. It's particularly bad for black, I think, because for a couple of tactical kind of reasons coming up, potentially. If I do get in e2, e4, then e4, e5 is a vicious threat, forking the knight and bishop. Also, if I get in e2, e4, then the dark square bishop opens up on the c1 to h6 diagonal, and I can start really working over these dark squares and getting an attack going, you know. It could get vicious. I've lifted my queen to d3. I've talked about how this is often an active square for the queen on d3, and I don't necessarily mind it. It's a little more juicy than the queen on c2 and that I usually get in my opening system, because the queen on c2 is ultimately opposed by a rook. But of course, again, there's so many layers in chess that this not moving the c7 pawn and blocking it with the knight has really closed off this whole action along the c file, which is common in my opening system here. So let's look. Can I play e2, e3, e4 right away? And the answer obviously is no. since the queen is the only piece supporting that. But I did promise you I would start to support this pawn advance. I want to throw the rook right into e1 right now for the f rook. And now, but I could play e2, e4 right away. See, one of the reasons I don't play the collie is it does require quite a bit of theory. Not only because you're moving your bishop to d3, and it could come under attack either by black's c pawn by advancing or knight to b4, and you have to make all kinds of preparatory moves like c2, c3, so that the knight has a hole on c2 to come back, but also robs the queen of a square, or play a2, a3 to keep the knight from coming into the b4 bishop. I seem to be talking more about the collie than I am about my own game. Anyway, I'm not gonna. I'll just end the ramble here. I could play this right now, right? It could happen right now. The point I was trying to make, however, is that this e pawn has to be timed. The bishop is a little vulnerable. There needs to be preparatory moves, so you have to know the system setup for the collie. It's not that hard to learn, honestly. The ultimate idea in the collie is to exchange off the c pawn with your d, exchange or have your opponent take off the e pawn, which opens the diagonal for the bishop. But most importantly, in the collie system, you get a potential ace up your sleeve for the endgame by having a 3-2 pawn majority on the queen side, meaning you can create an outside passed pawn, which is advantageous. So you have that leverage. You have kind of a winning potential in the end game, winning chances. Typically, yeah, a 3-2 queenside pawn majority with the king's castled on the king side is winning. Is some potential. If not winning potential, it can afford enough counterplay to hold a draw, and so on and so on and so on and so on. But there is another preparatory move, which is rook f to e1. That's a perfunctory type move, bringing the rook to the center. We like the rooks in the center because very likely this e file is going to open, and we want our rook there and waiting for that grand moment because rooks like open files. This rook does not want to be defending the the f2 pawn. Believe you me. And this rook is not particularly happy either. One is he can't see his partner. Rooks like to be connected because of this bishop, and this bishop says, look, well, what can I do? He hasn't finchetted me to the b square, and I have to wait until all this traffic down the c1 h6 diagonal gets cleared out. So I am going to do it here. Let's consider what plans my opponent might play. Notice knight e4 doesn't work because black loses a pawn. I do have to be, there's a little potential tricks in this position. The triangle is defending against it quite well, but there's always bishop takes pawn and opening the d file for the queen. Let's suppose the d5 pawn is not there, and that check is a tactical trick. So if anything's loose on the d file and the d pawn goes missing, say I advance the e pawn, then I have to be aware of these tricks, and especially since my queen is there. And she is undefended on d3, so she is a little vulnerable on d3. With the light squared bishops off, though, and no easy way to put a knight pressure onto that square, she is very, very safe on her roost on d3 right now. Plus, she likes the fact that she has a good diagonal that runs all the way from f1 to a6, in addition to an attacking diagonal from b1 to h7. Although we are biting on granite, however, like I said, we have the lift opportunity, and these dark squares are weak. If I can get my dark square here, that's going to be a very difficult pin against this knight for black to deal with. He might have to drop the bishop back. The knight is undefended. Loose pieces drop off. Tactically, when we see a loose piece, we think about, can we attack it or use it as leverage? I'm going to move the play classically, rook f1 to e1. I don't like that move at all for black. It's just strengthening now. It's just created a target for my dark squared bishop. Waiting patiently in the wings on the c1 square for the diagonal to open up, and he just gave me a target. Now queenside attack is looking, sorry, kingside attack is looking in the cards. I don't normally play in this square. See, by playing this new, or it's not a new idea, but playing this triangle idea in the opening, I have foregone my usual type play on the queen side, and instead I'm going to be playing here on the king side with a king side attack by the looks. I mean, if black is going to play these types of moves, like h7, h6, and not defend the dark squares on that side and so on, I'm going to have to attack over there, and I don't know what else to say to the bot Isabel. Okay, if you're going to make me attack you, I will. I don't like to. I prefer to play on the queen side. I prefer to play in this box using my opening system. But if you're going to do it, I don't know what to say. So let's push now. I think now is the time. Now the threat here. Knight takes. Knight takes. Let's trade all this stuff off. Okay, now I have a choice between the rook and the queen. Notice the half-open file. So the rook is happy. The bishop is very happy, and that's sitting there almost right now. I should have looked at that. I should have looked at that previously. I can't go back. I can't take back moves, but just take. Okay, no, I can't. I can't take the pawn yet. Okay. I can't take this pawn yet. I have to wait, and wait. Queen takes, then he's going to have to do something about that. Rook takes. I've been experimenting recently in my games with rook takes e4, or rook takes e5 as the case may be, and lifting the rook and bringing it over. I can line my queen and king up on these light squares again because there's no light squared bishop by black to take advantage of that particular geometry, so I can't get a rook pinned to my queen. I do have to be wary, like I said, always be wary of this. Okay? The only thing between me and losing my queen on the d3 square is my d4 pawn, which I have no intention whatsoever of moving. Although we could see something like this. If I take with the queen and he does play e6, e5, then I cannot capture with the knight. I can't capture with the pawn, and he can't retake it, so that's out. Same with the rook, though. It's kind of a weird move for black to play, but I expect him to challenge in the center. I believe I'm better in this position, maybe by quite a bit. The rook can come over. The knight would be protected against the predations of the black queen. And again, no light squared bishop means this knight can't be removed easily, and he can't annoy, well, he could annoy it thusly. You know, he could try some pawn charge, but this is a threat coming up next. So after I take here, he might have to do something like h6 or 5, or come to the king to h7. Then I go here. If his king is on h7, then the queen is really starting to get frisky and excited because he's in her sights. Queen loves to put the enemy king into her sights. If he plays here, that just further weakens the dark squares. I can even plant a bishop on h7, harass this rook, drive it to where it wants to go, bring a knight in. This is the more, Again, we're playing an experimental game. I don't normally play moves like c2, c3. And I haven't normally, though recently I have been playing more rook to takes the center pawn instead of more classical, even minor pieces sometimes. All right, now these dark squares are very weak indeed, and they're getting weaker. Something I probably should have considered was by moving h6, the black h pawn has left behind its brother on g6. And why is that important? Because the queen can eye it. So if I were to play, if my queen were on e4 right now and I played here, gaining tempo against the queen and starting to take claim on those empty dark squares on the king's side, then he would not be able to play by blocking with f6 because queen takes pawn would have been on play. Do I want to rush my bishop into that square? Because he'll probably defend this way. Okay, so the question is, do I want to continue into the attack here, or do I want to play for other positional trumps? If I play bishop to g5 and he interposes with his bishop on the e7 square as I anticipate, so if this happens and we exchange, the black queen is happy because she's just connected the rooks. She's doing the guarding of the dark squares, and I've traded off my main piece for exploiting those dark squares, which is my dark squared bishop. I want to develop my dark squared bishop, so if I don't put it here on g5, then I could put it on h6, slightly unorthodox, and I think drive the rook where it wants to go, to the e file where all the action is. Plus, king to h7 can be played with tempo against the bishop. Bishop, I don't think I'm going to play bishop here on g5 for reasons already discussed. I'm not going to play bishop to h6. Bishop f5 drops the bishop. I could go bishop to e3, defending my strong point on the d4 square. However, I'm blocking my rook queen lift, which is what I'm planning, and then we can play bishop to d2. A little slow, to be honest. However, now my rook, where it was sleeping on a1, we can wake it up and put it on this open file, doubled. An advantage of lifting a rook like this, even to put it in the center of the board, as funny as that looks optically, is how quickly it can be doubled. If this rook gets into trouble, it can simply retreat back to e2. Again, I don't have to worry about the light squares because there's no light squared bishop. This is probably not correct, honestly. There might be something more vigorous and muscular to play in this position, but I want to complete my development. I don't agree, Isabel, with your move here. Queen to e8. Probably the machine was just scared of this, honestly, and was getting its queen out of the way, and for some reason didn't realize that bishop e7 would be the way to play against that maneuver. But the big problem with queen to e8, besides taking her eye off all these important dark squares, is she's put herself nice tactically and juicily in the line of sight of my dark squared bishop, who's peering over the head of this teeny pawn at the queen's crown behind it. Just take a quick check on my queen side. Everything is solid here. Black has made no real effort to do anything about it. I could gain space. I could, if I wanted to, play on both sides of the board here, gain space, even play some move like b2, b4, followed by b5, kick in the knight. However, the knight has a nice place to stay right here, and now the knight is around the king defending it. I might want to put the dark square bishop here now. Now let's develop the rook first. Let's get finish our development. Now we're going to start the shenanigans. No sooner than I say black has done nothing on the queen side, we start to see the beginnings of a potential threat with b7, b5, followed by b4, attacking my pawn train, trying to undermine my center, and to get something going on the queen side to distract me from the fact the situation is going from bad to worse. And look, see, there it is. This is probably the move I missed. Okay, I probably missed this move. Let's see if I did. Okay, when I moved rook on a to e1, I went with the perfunctory development move. So the situation, I just scroll back to move 14. This was the situation on the board. As soon as this queen moved over, I could have played here, right? So I made it an inaccuracy because I'm being a positional style player. I hate to harp on myself about this. I don't look at specific tactical motifs often enough, and I don't calculate them deeply enough, and I don't do a lot of things, and I really need to self-flagellate myself more because it's terrible. It's terrible chess. I told you we're going to have good coffee and bad chess. However, the bot 1600 very politely gave me another chance, and there we go. Okay, now the queen goes to c8, another foray onto the light squares where she does not belong. I can win the exchange right away. Now, I can win the exchange. Okay, we all can see that now. All of us, even the Russian schoolboys, we all know the rules of chess. I can win the exchange, and we all know the point system in chess, where a rook is worth 5 points and a bishop is worth 3 points and a pawn is worth 1 point. So I'd be up the equivalent of 2 points or 2 pawns. Correct. However, the dark squared bishop would be back kind of where it belongs on this short diagonal from f8 to h6, and where it will finally fianchetto itself after its wanderings. It comes home to roost, back on its starting square, and then fianchetto itself. And I think that will shut down my attack at that point. So I'll be up the exchange, but with no attack on the king side. Is that bad? No. Why? Because I can start to advance here. Also, if black opens the e-file, I have more rooks. We'll exchange off another set of rooks, and then I will have a rook with a commanding presence on this e-file. Winning the exchange is without question, but I think that's going to have to change my mindset. And sometimes that happens after you win material. What happens is you coordinate your pieces, or you start to anyway, on a target. Then you achieve that target, and once you achieve that target, paradoxically, your pieces are no longer coordinated. And you have to reorganize, develop a new target, re-coordinate, and so on. So winning material, taking a target, making a triumphant move can also at the same time be what's a good word for it? I'm going to try to think of a good word. Now you got to sit here and listen to dead air or me rambling. It uncoordinates. So what's a good word for uncoordinates? Well, let's just use that word for now. It uncoordinates your pieces. These dark squares are so damn weak over here that I'm really almost hesitant not to take the rook. However, it seems to me that black can fix those dark squares, or should be trying to fix those dark squares with this dark squared bishop. So even if I get my queen going over here, the dark square bishop will almost certainly spoil my plans on the dark squares. I could continue my attack. This is ruthless, followed by knight, followed by queen to h7. That's absolutely ruthless. Or I could just take the exchange, and you're going to watch me for 30 moves grind grind the Isabel down by playing on the queen side. So I could play for glory here instead. The position is really bad for black. This is devastatingly. I don't know. I'm +4, +5 in this position. You'd think I'd be just +2 something and change, $2 and change, due to the exchange, which puts me up equivalent of 2 points plus the change would be other positional things. But I think my other positional trumps in this position are worth another 2 pawns. Again, shenanigans though on this dark side, on the dark squares, can be greatly impeded. The knight also, and black hasn't done this, but the knight also can get back into the defense. And notice how the knight on f5, should black play the dark knight there, notice how it is defended by 2 pawns, good, and its roost is protected because I can't try and kick it with the aggressive g2, g4, thanks to the spear point of the h4 pawn. Shield in the front, spears stick out to the side. That's how pawns work. Shield in the front, spear sticks out to the side. They're like a soldier, frontline soldier with a spear and a shield. All right, all that yapping. We're going to take the exchange and we're just going to grind, okay? Now the queen is over doing dark squares. I think my attack is more or less over. Black now has command of the dark squares because it has a dark squared bishop. What I need to do is open the position for my rook. And the sooner the better. So my original concept was, let's start advancing these queenside pawns and take advantage of the fact I have targets to accelerate the advance. Then I'll have a whole lot of space over here. But I do need to take into account the fact that black has 2 minor pieces to my 1. And if he can get them to good squares, who knows, he might be able to create enough defensive resources to make my life miserable. Not miserable, more difficult, annoying. It could annoy me. Okay, Isabel, the 1600 bot, could annoy me. I should be able to win this game. Now it's clearly winning. I'm thinking about playing d5 patzers. It's d5. Why open this file? Get these rooks going. Also, knight can come to d4. I'm in absolutely no danger of an attack. Despite the black square domination on the dark squares, I could in the last extremity play g2, g3 to shut down this dark diagonal. Advantage of this move, d4, d5, is black is going to have to do something about it immediately because the knight is under attack. Takes. Now my queen is looking at the black king again over the head of the f7 pawn. That means this move is out for black. Not that he would play it, but you never know. He might try something like that. If I go here and I'm kicking the knight will move back, forcing me to do something with my pawn. I take, he takes. Now the knight could come here, which is kind of what I was afraid, but boom, the rooks are going to pile up on that pawn. So let's do this. I think this is what's called for in the position. I don't see how he avoids the loss of a pawn here. Okay, knight move's very tricky. I have problems with knights posting up on my side of the board. This knight has retreated. That's the good news. The bad news, knight to f5 is strong. I think that's where the knight belonged a while back. However, this looks like it's going to lose a pawn. But before we look at that, we're going to take a moment to look at these knight hops. Do you see how I like to move the knight and then I like to look at the next square? So knight f5 can cover and attack all these squares. It's also covering the bishop. Don't know if that's an issue. But there's nothing at the end of the rainbow for the knight. They want to target. My queen would be 2 squares on a diagonal away from the knight, meaning the knight would have to make 3 moves just to try to threaten my queen. But if black is going to give me a pawn, we're going to take it. You're playing well, Isabel says. I'm going to need to find some tricks. Oh, joy. So, in other words, it's spooling up the CPU. Isabel, the 1600 bot, is spooling up the CPU. Alright, just going to give me another pawn and a pin against the queen. And undermines this because now it doesn't have a defender except this knight, which is wanted to be on f5. Alright, we're going to take another pawn. That's fine. We don't mind. Which way are you going? Queen takes. I could force the queens off right now. I'm up the equivalent of 3 points now in terms of material, but also my positional trumps, I think, add another 2 or 3 points. I'm probably a computer evaluation here up by $6 and change. By that I mean 6 point something. That's a bit optimistic. Okay, maybe I'm $5 and change. I am tempted to just exchange my queens because I'm up so much material. And I have a pawn majority to work with now. And the files are opening, or the columns here are opening up. Yeah, the files are opening up for the rooks. This bishop, pretty strong. Pretty strong. That's I had to give up my dark squared bishop for the exchange, and we discussed whether I really wanted to give up a piece of mine that was gripping these dark squares, and we decided greedily that winning the exchange was by far the best move. There is a threat in the position, which is knight to g5, threatening the queen and also threatening to come in to the e6 square. So we look at sometimes 2 jumps from my knight too. See? Do you see how the second jump comes with more pizzazz, more oomph? Because there's 2 good squares that knight could jump to from there. The knight on e6 would be an octopus knight, controlling squares deep in black's camp. 8 of them, in fact. The knight on e6 would be worth a rook also, so you could add that more to my... Knight on e6 would move the queen out off this f7 square. I'm sorry, knight on g5 would move the queen off the square, meaning this check can come. And I'd be looking for checkmate with coordinating my queen, my knight, and my rooks. If the queen moves too far away, I can win 2 pieces for the rook. Got to be careful about back rank mates. I'm just noticing now if my rooks come off. See, now my king needs luft. I need to play this at some point, or possibly even this to blunt this bishop. Although that would move into that last desperate attack. That's a tactical nuance I need to start paying attention now. That back rank mate tactical alert starts now. Oh look, there's a queen takes pawn. But if she does that, I win 2 pieces for the rook. It'd be 2 pieces for a rook and a pawn. So here takes, and takes with really dire threats all along this rank. Really dire threats. So I don't think black can afford to waste time capturing the meaningless, measly, little, insignificant a2 pawn at this time. Making the decision now between queen c4, simply continuing my policy of exchanging off material while I'm material head, but then denoting that black's position starts to become more solid at that point, despite him being down material, or playing my knight to g5 and then here, and having the octopus knight. The knight would also support a pawn advance. Let's play assertively. Let's play like we know what we're doing. Okay, now it's going to offer the queen. It's going to offer the queen. My queen unprotected. I don't have to accept this trade. Now I have a threat of winning 2 pieces for the rook, but the back rank mate is still in play. Okay. My queen can come back. Meaning now if I want to get my queen out of the way and I want to preserve her on the board for my attacking chances, perhaps the best way to do that... Oh, look. I would have to cover my back rank somehow. Either the D1 square or the F1 square to prevent the back rank mates. But also cover this knight, which I could only do from this square. But obviously that drops the queen. There's a checkmate here-ish and here-ish. This still not in the cards. If I take, knight takes, and we're kind of back to where we were before. Knight not really any better though on d5 than it was on f5 in terms of threats, and in fact I can gain time against it. This check here would get the last rook off, and then my remaining rook would be king of the files. I kind of want to keep my queen on the board. One is so I can present you folks with a checkmate, and 2, because the black king is open and I'm not done yet. I think the move here is going to be queen to e3, but then that now all of a sudden now the knight does have a... I might have to exchange queens, folks. I'm very sorry. Very sorry for what's happening in this position. I didn't expect black to exchange queens. Black needed to somehow keep hope alive, maybe by coordinating an attack with its remaining pieces, which, you know, it could have done. Isabel, the CPU, could have crunched the numbers and worked an attack by putting the knight here on f5, bringing maybe the rook to the f file, coordinating the bishop and the queen, using the h7 pawn as the initial target, but also maybe targeting the the h2 pawn, or the f2 pawn, targeting it, and so on and so on and so on. Of course, during that time, I'd also be checkmating black. I wouldn't be sitting there doing nothing and twiddling my thumbs. However, that was a possibility for black. You're down. Okay, you're down the exchange plus positional considerations, and you're playing this way. So I take the queen off, boom, check. The rooks come off. King can't harass the remaining rook by moving to f7 because it's covered by the knight, which is on a pretty good square. I'll post it up. He'd have to exchange another piece to get rid of it. The knight and the rook by itself, though, I have to look at those patterns again, because the knight and the rook is not as good as the knight and queen attacking a king. But I think there are tricks with knight and rook with a king on the back rank. I'm going here, but I would need to get this chain going. And I'd want to get this going, and I want to get my king to the center. So there's a couple things. Once this queen is off, my king can start ranging. All right, I'm sorry. I apologize to you guys. My apologies. Okay, we're just gonna exchange the material. Okay, now my rook controls the e file all by his lonesome. King here. Okay, I could check and take this. Except he'll take back. Okay, now the knight, they could try to pick on my pawns. If I move the pawn to h4 to post up this knight, in cement, so to speak. Stops any further motion here in coordination with the dark square bishop. I can't move away yet. Problem is, it could become something of a target. This is the pawn majority that I'm going to have to get mobilized. I do not have a pawn majority on this side. This is a little bit strong. But these pawns are both unprotected. Can I harass them? He's going to probably set up a dark square blockade over here. Do you see? He's probably going to set up a dark squared blockade. I do have check and take. So one idea here is simply exchange more stuff off. No, that doesn't work. I'm down a piece. Okay, it's not going to be so easy for me to win this. It's winning, no doubt, but it's not going to be so easy for me to win this. If I play h4, it would be a fool to exchange off this dark squared bishop the way it is. It's almost worth a rook in this situation. The knight is in the center too, where it can harry, it can move. The knight has a lot of options in the center. This check, pets or c check, pets or mace check would be disastrous for me. The king is my rook is cutting the board in half. However, the king has no real need to get over to the queen side because these two pieces are more than enough to defend. I could try to kick the bishop right away, right, and go like this. So that's an idea. Here, knight has to move. Let's say it goes here because the computers are material greedy. I go here. Knight has to move again. He goes here. Now he's protecting that pawn, so I can no longer play this. He's also attacking that. I can't go here because boom, but then I can Bobby Fischer that bishop. I can try to harass this bishop. What if I go rook? Yeah, I see this nice juicy outpost, and it looks so beautiful, this construction, especially if I get a pawn protecting it. However, what is the knight really doing there? Even if I get a check in with the rook, it doesn't. The second rank is no benefit to my rook right now with this bishop. This bishop is my main issue. Usually it's knights, but right now it's this bishop. So I can force the bishop off this square. Now the bishop's got to decide, do I want to stay on this diagonal or do I need to relocate somewhere like here? I bump it again. Threaten the knight, which is on a light square, can't be defended by the bishop, then come here and then take. I think centralizing my knight is the move here. Fine. Look, takes, so I don't understand what the issue is. If I take the knight, then it's rook against bishop. Like I said, the bishop is going to hold down the entire queen side itself, and I have to rely on my king side majority, which is still winning. It's still winning, but how does this not just dominate? How is black not losing a piece? Let's find out. Yeah, now, look, that's it. The linchpin of his position is gone just like that, the snap of my fingers. Now y'all don't have to wait very long. I'm simply going to run these pawns down. Let's pin the knight. Okay, the king takes the knight. The king is in the square for the pawn. But I've got two of them. My own king is yet to get into the game. This knight is pinned. I could take it at any moment. Let's see how he gets into this square. Okay, now he's out of the square. See, the square, this is the endgame lesson here from, here's your Dvoretsky, a little bit of Dvoretsky, okay? This is the square, so if the king wants to stop my pawn from queening, the coronation, the king has to be on one of these squares here, inside the square, so to speak, so that it can chase to here. Because now he can't stop it. You could just do the math, folks. Okay? Look at the geometry of the situation. That doesn't help you. Just look at the geometry. Funny, this never moved, never budged. I'm just going to torture him a little bit, prevent further advances. Queen. Now, the easiest way to win this actually is queen the second pawn. But I'm going to practice the L. Okay, this is the L formation. Here, he stayed in the L, so it's fine. I'm going to move my king forward. This is the L. This is how we trap a king, apparently. I just learned this from Instagram, of all places. He's staying in the L. That's fine. Okay, staying in the L. Now he's got to get out of the L. I'll reestablish the L. See the L? The L was here, right? Reestablish the L. Got to be careful now of stalemates, although he has this and this. He does, if he liquidates these two pawns, which he should do post haste. Okay, he's in the L still. So here or here is that. Where's the checkmate? So here, where's the checkmate? If he comes here, that's going to be a mate. I go here, he runs back this way. I create the L, but now my queen's kind of in the way of the king. But he can't go here, he has to go here. So I think this is the way. And then this should end it. Now he is in a stalemate position, but he has a pawn move. And that's mate. Wow. Okay. A lot more rambling than I normally do. The computer has just thrown up an evaluation saying there was one mistake. I'm sure there was. But I think that was a good game from start to finish. I did play a little experiment with c2, c3 and pushing my e-pawn. Not something I normally play out of my formation. I'm going to look more at that actually in terms of fighting that anti-collie bishop when he posts up his light squared bishop on the f5 square. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed today's bot beating. Bad chess and good coffee. That's the last of the 1600 bots down. We're moving on to the 1700 bots next. Ta-ta. And more tatas, so I tried to bring up OBS where I'm recording. It's okay, bye-bye.